Radio.
102.3 FM, K292 FQ, Riverside.
Are you ready for a new experience? To see life from another point of view? New hope, new expression, new joy. This is your radio hour. Welcome to Viewpoint with Father John.
And welcome, friends. You're tuned to NBC Radio, KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, somewhere in that range. Or you can listen from anywhere in the world at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reed. As a reminder, you can follow us on both Facebook and Instagram. Just look for Viewpoint with Father John. And you can also see us on Twitter. And my tag is Father John Reed. Father is spelled out, and Reed is the proper Irish, R-E-I-D. Anything less would be uncivilized. And if you missed the show, you can catch us on YouTube. Just in the search bar, put Viewpoint with Father John, KCAA, and you'll find our stuff all over there. All of God's children are endowed with extraordinary purpose and ability. I'm on a quest to help as many as possible in fully realizing their divinely inspired potential. Disposing a false narrative and embracing genuineness inspires clarity of purpose. My role is to help overcome self-imposed limitations in realizing one's spiritual potential. And folks, as we do each week, I tell you about my favorite pharmacy in California, which is Claremont Pharmacy, which, with such luck, it's in Claremont, California. That just worked. The stars aligned, and it worked out just right for that. It's on the corner of Indian Hill Boulevard and Narrow Highway. And if you still need your vaccination, they have them there for free. They have both the Moderna and the J&J. Please get vaccinated, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. When one of us gets better, we help the whole community. So don't be afraid. I got the stick, you should too, as they say in England. Also, I want to tell you about the best DJ service that you will find. It is Lakeside DJ Services, and Frank, our sound engineer, owns this, and they do have a photo booth. It's incredible. Could you picture that? He's very focused. And so if you have a special occasion coming up, I personally recommend Frank's service, and you can get them at lakesidedjservices.com. And folks, just real quickly, we haven't talked about COVID for a few weeks here because we were really making some good progress. But that's being reversed right now. And I want to clear up a couple of things. The stuff that's coming out of right-wing media, I'm just going to call it where it is. It's dangerous, and it's a lie. You're not going to change your DNA by getting this vaccine. We had these same things happen when we had the polio vaccine, all these different ones that we get. And look how healthy our children got because we followed science. Please, there's people with political agendas that are misinforming you. And I care enough about you, and I have credibility with you. So you know that I wouldn't say it if it wasn't absolutely true. I fact-checked all this. That's why I got my vaccination. I do too many COVID funerals. It's not necessary for people to die. In fact, the statistic now is that 99% of all COVID deaths are people who are not vaccinated. Less than 1% have been people who have been vaccinated. So please, particularly if you're a person of faith, have some faith in science and medicine, which are gifts from God, and get the vaccine. Okay? And real quickly, one last thing, talking about straight information. I want to tell you about my friend Glenn Kirshner and Justice Matters. Some of you will see it on your screen right now. And if you want straight information on stuff going on in the world, particularly of law, Glenn was a federal prosecutor for 30 years, and he was also a JAG lawyer, prosecutor in the United States Army, fellow Army guy. So you can count on his integrity. Glenn is one of those people that if it's not true, he won't say it. I think if the man told a lie, his tongue would snap off. He's a great man. I also want to send him a thank you. As a lot of you know, last week I had a heart procedure, an angiogram, and Glenn was kind enough to send me a beautiful care package with some chicken soup in it and all kinds of stuff. And so, Glenn, if you're listening, thank you. I really appreciate it. I have a special guest tonight, one who's one of my dearest friends, one of my closest friends, and someone I really share a lot of spirituality with, and I have great respect for his brand of spirituality. It's Father Mark Hallahan, and he's from St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Pomona. And it's funny they put that in Pomona, not Claremont, but it's but that's okay. Salvation is where you can find it. And when we get home, he's going to drown me in a bucket of holy water. That's for that one. But Father Mark, welcome to the show.
It's an honor and a privilege to be here, Father John. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. I was so thrilled when you agreed to come on the show. In our traditions, Eastern Orthodox, Episcopalian, and at one time Roman, Franciscan, we believe in a thing called spiritual direction, which is different than psychotherapy, but just as important as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. I don't think it should be one or the other. I think they're two dance partners that go together very well. And as I often say on the show, the physician and the metaphysician should be working hand in hand, not in spite of each other.
Amen.
And so could you talk a little bit about what is spiritual direction and why is it important? Something simple like that.
Something simple like that. Well, simply put, we can't walk the spiritual journey alone. It has its joys and its struggles. It has its glories, and sometimes its devastations as well. It's all part of the spiritual journey. As we walk this way, Ram Dass once said that, we're all about just walking each other home. And to me, that's the essence of spiritual direction, walking each other home to where we are meant to be in the arms of our beloved Creator, however we define our higher power, our God. And so it's to me a companionship. In the Irish language, they use the term anamcara, and anamcara is the Irish Celtic words for soul friend.
Right.
And that whole concept of soul friend goes back to the early Irish monks, in the early centuries when Christianity flourished in Ireland, and they companioned each other, in their journey, and they told each other their stories, and they listened to each other's concerns and questions, and also confessed their shortcomings and sins to each other, but they walked that journey as partners, and I think that spiritual direction is something that we have missed out upon probably for a number of centuries, and now I see that some of the mainline churches especially have been returning to that over the last probably 30 or 40 years.
I think that's very important. Just to interject that in American spirituality, for years has been a solo act, as we say, an individual thing. And this is just my opinion, but I'm right. That for us to walk this path, salvation is not just an individual thing. In fact, salvation originally taught was that it was universal. Mm-hmm. And in fact, there was an Episcopalian bishop that had, I think he flew into Brackett Airport or Cable, one or two of them over here. And some guys were in the coffee shop that's there, and they saw him get out of whatever he was flying that day. A friend of mine relayed this to me. And they saw his purple shirt, meaning he's a bishop. And so these guys were a couple of hot shots, as they call themselves, born-agains. And so he asked, do you know Jesus? He says, of course I know Jesus. They said, when were you saved? He says, 2,000 years ago, the same time you were. He said, no. When were you saved? He says, I told you, 2,000 years ago, same time that you were. In the beginning, and in the Orthodox, I know this is true, I could speak from that color of Kool-Aid, that's how we've taught for years, and from the beginning is that it was universal. God didn't just pick one group and say, you kids get it, everybody else, turn or burn kind of thing. And I'm sorry, in American spirituality, we've kind of gotten away from that. And all that to say, to me, this is one reason spiritual direction's so important. You know, we were joking before the show about, you know, do you know how to do the Texas two-step, you know, dancing, because we had a country western song on. And I know how to do the dance, but somebody showed me how to do that dance.
Exactly.
They shared with me. And so how are we supposed to learn a dance if no one's there to show us some of the footwork that goes with it?
Precisely. And when I mentioned that term soul friend, anamkara, you know, it is, you know, companioning someone. But it's important that one of the partners have some training and experience in the spiritual path, and so it's important that people who are spiritual directors are trained in spiritual direction. And there's a lot of programs that offer that. For example, the Loyola Institute for Spirituality, which is the Jesuit Ignatian exercises in the city of Orange, they have a great spirituality center, and they actually train people to become spiritual directors in the Ignatian method. And the Ignatian method, let me just explain that briefly, is that comes out of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit order. We all have heard of the Jesuits, a very famous religious order founded by St. Ignatius of Loyola. And he developed what were called the Ignatian exercises, which is a whole retreat program that anybody can actually do. And it's encouraged that, you know, lay people, clergy, believers, you know, in the Christian path or not, can enter into studying, you know, that whole process of sort of learning about who we are in the sight of God, and working through, you know, learning to know how loved we are unconditionally, and then also learning to wrestle with some of those struggles that we have. And so people who are trained in the Ignatian exercises have to do the actual course, the actual exercises, which is a 30-day program. And they're steeped in that. And then they also have workshops on how to exactly, you know, help others, you know, find their way on the path. So that's one. And the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles has Still Point, which is another training program for spiritual directors. And the Roman Catholic Archdiocese has another one too. So there are places where people who are feeling called to be spiritual directors can apply and take those courses. And it's important, if you're looking for a spiritual director, to contact one of those centers, and they can refer you to somebody who's had that training, because spirituality is a very personal journey. It's a very vulnerable journey,
Yes.
very sensitive journey. And so when you're dealing with things of the soul, you want to make sure that you have a partner, a companion, a spiritual director who can really discern, like, what the Spirit may be doing in your life, what God may be doing in your life, what the call is to you, what is it that you are about, you know, in your journey now. It's really good to have somebody. It's the same if you're seeking a psychotherapist. You want somebody who's been trained in psychotherapy. If you go to a medical doctor, you want to make sure it's, you know, somebody trained well. So it's the same, you know, for the medicine for the soul, the doctors of the soul, in a sense, you know, have those trainings, you know, and that's really important.
Now, do I have to be of the same denomination as my spiritual director?
No, not at all. And that's the beauty of it, is that most of the programs that I know of are ecumenical, and they welcome. Certainly, in these particular ones, it's a Christian, you know, Christ focus, and so the focus is on helping somebody through the Christian journey. But you know, there are other programs too, which, you know, relate to Buddhism and Hinduism, and, you know, I think we learn from the East, you know, the importance of the you know, the guru in somebody's life. You know, somebody like Ram Dass, who I mentioned before, who in a way was very much like a spiritual director, and gurus are in that sense, although they're much more than that in that tradition, or in the Buddhist tradition. You know, the monk who leads the younger monks and teaches the younger monks. You know, certainly it's so we've had to actually, you know, go to the East to learn and relearn some of what was already so key to Christianity from its early ages. You know, the fathers and mothers of the desert, and all the way into the Irish monks and nuns, and that's been carried through history. But we lost some of that, and we've gone back to that big time.
Well, speaking of spiritual direction, Frank is looking at me through the glass saying he's going to show me something spiritual if we don't go to commercial break. So you're listening to Viewpoint with Father John, and we'll be back in 90 seconds.
Great. Oops.
This is 1050 AM KCAA Loma Linda and 106.5 FM Yucaipa.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
It's time to make the Tri-City Center in Redlands a regular part of your weekly shopping experience. Tri-City is home to a wide assortment of quality businesses, including the all-new Ocean Aquatics. Check out their variety of exotic tropical fish, along with fish food, accessories, and tanks of all shapes and sizes. The Tri-City Center is located just off of Alabama and the Tennessee exits in Redlands. Visit the Tri-City Center today and find out why it's called the Mall with a Heart.
And welcome back. You're tuned to NBC Radio, KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or again, you can listen from anywhere in the world at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reed. Just a quick shout out to the best sound man in the business. How you doing, Frank? You doing good tonight? I caught him mid-yawn there. I think I'm keeping him awake on accident. And our deal is that as long as I let him sleep, he'll keep doing the engineering of the show. But, I broke our contractual agreement there. Can't hear you.
My headphones went missing, so I can't hear what I'm saying right now.
That's okay. Anyhow, glad to see you tonight. Thanks for everything you're doing. Again, if you need a good DJ service, he has that. LakeSideDJServices.com. And I was going to say something funny, but I'm going to leave it alone. My guest this evening is my dear friend and my spiritual brother, Father Mark Hallahan, and he's a priest at St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Pomona. My tongue was over my eye tooth. I couldn't see what I was saying. So we're talking a little bit about spiritual direction tonight. And for some people, this is a new topic that you may not have heard this before. And it's not just a Roman Catholic tradition. It's an Eastern Orthodox tradition. It is a Episcopalian tradition. Methodists have it. Lutherans have it. And it's a long-time tradition. And you referenced the Desert Father and Mothers. Back when we had co-ed monks in the Celtic, a lot of people don't know about that. Right. But the women still ran everything. As a married priest, I understand.
And it worked very well.
It worked very well. It worked so well, we said, we got to stop that. So you don't have to be Catholic or Eastern Orthodox or any of the liturgical churches to have spiritual direction. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of people come to me, and I make a real separation when I'm doing psychotherapy with somebody opposed to spiritual direction. Now, those two can cross over, but I try to keep my lines clear with who's seeing me for which, because what I may give them might be just a little bit different, not better, just a little bit different for what they're trying to accomplish. And for me, and I'd like to get your input on this, Father Mark, I find that when I go to spiritual direction, I'm not being told I have to do this. Instead, I get some good questions asked. Have you tried this? Do you know about this method? You want to talk a little bit about how that works?
Well, spiritual directors, certainly have a wealth of knowledge about methods of prayer and meditation, and that's part of it, is to really help people in their prayer life. Because the major part of the journey, especially in the Christian tradition, is to make sure that you have a daily prayer life, whether it's keeping the what we call fixed hour prayer, the daily office, which goes back to the Jewish tradition of praying so many times a day, Muslim tradition praying so many times a day, and the Catholic monks and nuns and and Anglican and Orthodox monks and nuns, they keep the fixed hours. And that's what's called the daily office or the breviary, but praying so many times a day. So there are ways of teaching people that and showing people how to pray that, and then various forms of meditation. Meditation is important too, and what's popular now is centering prayer or Christian meditation, and that's sort of just spread through a lot of the denominations like wildfire, and people are hungering for that. And again, the last 20, 30 years, Father Thomas Keating, the Cistercian monk, and
Yes.
Father John Main, the Benedictine monk, started these great movements of learning how to meditate, which also goes back to the early fathers and mothers of the desert, where they learned how to pray using like one word, a mantra, and sitting in silence and repeating that sacred word and going from the head to the heart. And so spiritual directors offer that, but I think that spiritual directors sort of are like a living meditation too, because they help you in during that session to go from your head, what you're thinking and trying to maybe figure out, and maybe there's some negative thinking too. They want you to get from your head to your heart, and in your heart you can really experience just how loved you are by God, how unconditionally loved you are, and that God meets you where you are and loves you where you are, and that all that God wants is for you to have that peace and that joy and know that love. And so sometimes the spiritual director can be maybe nothing more than just a loving presence, listening to your story. And the first thing that usually is done in spiritual direction is that they ask a person either to write a spiritual autobiography or to tell their spiritual autobiography. And when you think you don't have one, you do.
Right.
Everybody has one. And it doesn't mean that, I was baptized in such a church when I grew up and made my first communion. That can be part of it, sure, but you might not have those experiences. But maybe you had a profound experience when you were a child at a beautiful pond or lake or in the woods, and you felt something really deep that was beyond you. That's part of your spiritual autobiography, and anybody who's in a liturgical church too. I mean, have those as well. I mean, it's across the board, but it's important that you look back and see, well, where has God or your whatever you want to call God, Jesus, where has the Lord been working in your life? Where have you seen him back in your life? Where are the times when you can say, oh my gosh, I really felt that presence. I really felt that person, that voice leading me. Or maybe look back and when was there a person who gave you some wisdom to make a decision? So that's part of looking back on your life and seeing where that we're horizontal, and then the love of God is constantly coming down vertically, and it forms that mesh, that weaving, that beautiful tapestry, and so it's important sometimes to look back at the beginning of that tapestry.
Well, and I love that. That's a great analogy of it. Now, I've had people ask me, and if you can talk on this for a little bit, I'd appreciate it. If I go to a spiritual director and I'm checking it out, are they going to try to convert me to their brand of religion?
I hope not. No, that's not part of it at all. I think it's to help you to go deeper wherever you have planted your roots. They can certainly, if you're looking, offer you options. But, if somebody comes to me, I just meet them where they are, and help them to go deeper where they're planted, no matter what that tradition is. And that, my role would be to just, water that plant so the roots go deeper and the flowers grow brighter, and, it's as simple as that. There is a real simplicity to it.
And I think that's important to know. And the reason I'm asking some of these questions is I've had people actually ask these, and I'm sure that we have some listeners who are wondering, who are not familiar with spiritual direction, who might have had some really painful religious experiences with people who, when they went to them for help, got dogma instead. Or told you just have to have more faith or whatever that is. And that's why I'm asking some of these questions, because my experience with spiritual direction, I've not had a spiritual director ever say to me, well, you just have to believe more. You just have to have greater faith. Instead, they've asked me questions. Where are you in this? How does that relate to you? How does that sit inside your heart? What's your heart telling you?
Yeah.
And for me, spiritual direction was a great discovery that I can pay attention to what's in my heart, that I'm not wrong because I thought it and someone else didn't think it at that moment. So that's why I'm asking some of these questions. So it's kind of helping you find out where your flow is and discovering you don't have to push the river. Would that be
right?
correct?
And it's all about the heart. It's a matter of the heart. And I think the spiritual directors, in a way, are a mirror. They hold up a mirror, and they basically sort of reflect back what you are saying, maybe in different words, and saying, and that's where it sort of sounds a little bit like therapy, that they would say, oh, I see that you are really feeling some fear about maybe going to church again, or that you feel some fear about maybe looking towards some kind of a vocation, and just pursuing it that way too. And tell me more about that. What do you think that fear? Where is that coming from? And where do you see then that Jesus can be there for you? And how can Jesus companion with you? And one of the most beautiful things in the Ignatian exercises is that in the Ignatian prayer, you actually are invited to picture yourself in a scripture scene in detail. That you pick a passage from the scripture, say, the angel announcing to Mary, that she's going to be the mother of Jesus, and picture yourself in that scene. You can be an onlooker, or you can be Mary, you can be the angel, and get totally into it. Get into the sounds and what people are wearing and what the weather's like, and just get into it. Use your imagination. We use our imagination for everything else, or our fantasy for everything else. We can fantasize being in that scene, and then, listening closely to what is going on in that scene, and actually sort of visualizing it and getting the message for us. What is that saying to me? What's the message for me? What's the angel saying to me? Maybe the angel saying, I God wants you to do something special too. Something, that just example.
No, I get that. Julian of Norwich is one of those that I think of.
Yeah.
That with the fact that she had that love affair with God, that her knowing these things, and to such a deep level, further than where I've gone with it. She's one of my heroes, like Mother Teresa of Calcutta. And I think sometimes in the religious world, we give people the erroneous idea that once you have faith, you never have doubt. And you never question things. You're just going along, and it's, as the old Tom T. Hall song goes, me and Jesus got our own thing going. I think I just qualified me as an old guy. So,
You're not.
And we have not really embraced community with that. And I think we've become sort of afraid of community because we've become so secret-oriented. And I'm going to take a little side road here. A lot of people misunderstand the idea of confession. why would I tell another man these things going on? I talk to God directly. Yeah, I talk to God directly too. And when I share it with somebody else, I can get feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And they can also help me to let go of some of this guilt, which comes from fear, which comes from shame.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't share this with other people, because I think, well, I could just share this with God, good, it's okay to share it with God. Are you getting feedback? And it's not that God's not listening to you, but sometimes for me, I have to hear God speaking through somebody else, not telling me what to do, but sharing with me some of their experience, some of their love, but also that they don't run away in horror or run up and try to fix me.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they help me to have my own discovery. Would that encompass what you...
Father John, that's good. I'm glad you brought up confession, because a lot of us who grew up with mandatory confession and had a few little horror stories, that sort of has put a lot of people off to that. But it does go along with spiritual direction, and it's not mandatory that you have to go to confession. And well, in the Episcopal Church, you don't. It's optional. But what you said is it's so important, because for me, my experience of confession in the Episcopal Church is just, again, that spiritual companionship, and having the priest just listen, just listen, and then offer some guidance, about how maybe to move away or out of this particular situation or sin or shortcoming or whatever it is, and then after that, the priest, then there will be silence, and then the priest says, "And I just want you to know, John, that God has put away all your sins." I mean, to hear those words from somebody, because we're sensual beings. We need touch, we need taste, we need to hear, we need all of our senses. And so even in that journey of our sinfulness, our shortcomings, we need to hear those words. We can read them in a book, yeah, and we can hear them in private prayer, but somehow to let them go and give them over to another person, and then have that person feedback, they're gone.
Yeah,
They're gone.
for me, I find that the more secrets I have, the more alone I feel.
Mm.
Because my whole fear is, what if somebody finds out?
Yeah.
And clergy get into a lot of trouble with this, I've seen through the years. And sometimes it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, so that they're so wrapped with guilt that they purposely get caught doing something that they know will get them fired.
Yeah.
And I don't say that in judgment of them. I say it with great compassion, because I think oftentimes if they had a spiritual partner, someone to walk the path with them, they would have realized it's okay to be human. That's how God created us.
Yeah.
And we're to be human beings, not human doers.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just having that trusted friend.
I think that's key, and and a lot of it is psychological. For those who sort of do that kind of thing to self-sabotage in a way. That's a psychological issue too, and I think that they need some psychological help too.
Yes.
And then you have the horrible extreme of child abuse.
Yes.
But that's in its whole other category. I mean, that's a real sickness, and and that's something that spiritual direction wouldn't solve. You know what I mean? That needs a lot more than spiritual direction, and that's a terrible thing that has hurt so many people and kept so many people from coming back into that kind of a relationship in an anamkara, soul friend kind of relationship, because of that kind of fear and that the horror of that whole period.
Mm-hmm. When we come back from the break, one of the things I'd like to talk about, if you'd be willing, is how we create our God. My experience has been, we take our parents, whatever our relationship has been with them, times it by 1,000, and that becomes our God. And that could be for good or for ill, either way. And I think sometimes spiritual direction can help bring us out from the weeds and get more of a loving relationship. So we'll be back in 90 seconds. You're listening to Viewpoint with Father John, and we're at commercial.
This is 1050 AM KCAA Loma Linda and 106.5 FM Yucaipa.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
It's time to make the Tri-City Center in Redlands a regular part of your weekly shopping experience. Tri-City is home to a wide assortment of quality businesses, including the all-new Ocean Aquatics. Check out their variety of exotic tropical fish, along with fish food, accessories, and tanks of all shapes and sizes. The Tri-City Center is located just off of Alabama and the Tennessee exits in Redlands. Visit the Tri-City Center today and find out why it's called the Mall with a Heart.
And welcome back. You're tuned to NBC Radio, KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or you can listen from anywhere around the world at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reed. And a shout out to the listeners all around the world. You know, I do appreciate the fact that you send me letters and you send me a lot of email stuff. I like hearing from you. I like your ideas you send me. It's kind of a neat community, and so thank you for taking the time to listen to the show. It's nice to know that you're out there, but more than that, I appreciate the trust you share with me as you send me the emails about what your experiences are and what you're looking for some help with. My guest tonight is a dear friend of mine, and we're both from different religious backgrounds, which is kind of cool that we've come together. And the reason that that's so cool is because we can all find common ground. We have to get out of who's right and into what's right. And that's a real art in itself. And when we get into that, again, going from the head to the heart, as Father Mark alluded to earlier, that's where we're connected. Our head will separate us. Our head's busy trying to be right. Mm-hmm. Our heart is busy with communion and being one with. And before we went to commercial break, I'd mentioned that I want to talk a little bit about building your God, or some people get mad when you say, create your own God. But we do it. And even if we deny that we do it, we do it. And a lot of times, I'm not the first one to say this, whatever our experience with our parents have been, we times it by 1,000, that becomes our image of God. So when we say create the God, we're not really creating God itself, we're creating our image of God. And if you've had absent parents, if you've had overbearing parents, controlling parents, that could be your image of God, that God is always out to get me. God is always looking for where I screw up. God's first instinct is to send me to hell. And there's a lot of people walking around with that. I know a child that was in front of a church and he was scared to death, and someone said, you don't have to be afraid, God's in there. He says, yeah, I know, and he's been waiting to get me. And he was being serious. He wasn't playing. He was very upset. He was scared to death because he grew up in that kind of home where the parents were very vindictive. And if you're coming into a spiritual life, a life of spiritual discovery, let me put it that way. We all have a spiritual life whether we're aware of it or not. But into spiritual discovery, sometimes it's helpful to have someone that we can share these things with that we've held for so long that we're afraid. because we don't have to have perfect faith. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is when the guy goes to Jesus for the healing of someone he loves, and Jesus asks, "Do you believe?" And he says, "I believe, help out my unbelief."
Yeah.
We can have faith and fear at the same time. And some people disagree with me, but I found I can have both. It's just one's a little heavier than the other at the moment. And my experience has been is God doesn't hold that against me as me being unfaithful. And it took some good spiritual direction for me to be able to see that God's not angry because I don't have faith 24 hours a day. So can you talk a little bit about making our spiritual discovery of our image of God?
Yes, and when you were saying that, what came to mind was one of my favorite prayers, which is the prayer of Thomas Merton, and I wish I had it memorized. But you can Google Thomas Merton's prayer, MERTO, and Thomas Merton's prayer, and read that prayer because it really encapsulates a lot of what we're just talking about. Thomas Merton was a Trappist monk, a strict form of Benedictine monk in the Roman Catholic Church, very famous, wrote a lot. In fact, when Pope Francis spoke before the United Nations, he held up, or before the Congress, he held up four Americans, to see as wonderful icons: Martin Luther King, Abraham Lincoln, Dorothy Day, and Thomas Merton. And a lot of us have been Thomas Merton followers for a long time. He's been a real teacher. And I think that he is the one who is really primarily responsible for the rediscovery of spiritual direction in Christianity, in mainline Christianity today. And so it's important that you read Thomas Merton along with, being on your journey, because Thomas Merton is somebody who can help you wherever you are in your journey. He was a Roman Catholic Cistercian Trappist monk, but he came to believe and to see and experience that on a mystical level, we are all completely one. In fact, he died, tragically, unfortunately, when he was in Bangkok, Thailand, addressing a world conference of monks and nuns from all traditions, Buddhist, Hindu, Catholic, Anglican, all across the board, because he saw that on that spiritual, mystical level, there is no separation. And Julian of Norwich, like you said, had got that. It's important that we study somebody like him who was able to see how we could move from the understanding of God from our childhood, which could be good or could not be so good, to becoming more and more universal, more and more cosmic. Because when people like Merton, and then in later years and current years, Father Richard Rohr, the Franciscan, talks that we're big fans of Father Richard Rohr. Talks about the cosmic Christ, that Jesus the Christ, at the resurrection became so universal and so accessible to all, and so his presence and that energy is just accessible to all, and within all faiths, all journeys. It's phenomenal. But we have to get to that place of the heart, where mysticism happens, and away from the head, where we make our divisions.
One of the things that makes Thomas Merton one of my favorites is he didn't live a saintly life before priesthood, and just about everything you can do wrong, he did wrong. I don't say that with judgment. I say that with hope, because I look at my venture into the priesthood. A guy who's been on his own since he was 14, has made a lot of mistakes. And God says, in spite of your iniquities, I can use you to love. And I love the expression perfectly imperfect. There's a book I love called The Spirituality of Imperfection that talks a lot about this. But I can relate to Thomas Merton because, he smoked, he drank, he womanized, he did all these things. I haven't. I wanted to, but no one was interested. So those of you who get me, you understand my humor. The other, lighten up.
I get him.
But the idea was he can go from that and find such a personal, all-encompassing, loving relationship one of the things that Richard Rohr says that you mentioned that I love, if you don't see God everywhere, you don't see God anywhere.
Right, yeah.
And that's where Thomas Merton helps me, because I could see God through him, through these things. And if he can find it, that means there's hope for a guy like me. I, too, am not going to be left out. That I can have this hope, this relationship, and have a God of love, not a God that's ashamed of me, wants to do away with me, or regretted creating me.
Yeah. Julian of Norwich's famous saying was, "There is no between God and the soul." And, again, that says that. And Merton met many times with the Dalai Lama and with Thich Nhat Hanh,
Yes.
and they were brothers, and then Dorothy Day the same. Dorothy Day's life was pretty wild, and then she ended up, becoming one of the greatest servants to the poor and one of the greatest advocates for peace and justice, all because of that spiritual journey that she made. She was a Benedictine oblate, which meant that they're, lay people who sort of try and live the rule of St. Benedict, the monastic life within the world, and live that. And she had spiritual direction. And, and so all of these people who became lights, had spiritual direction, people to really help them, to see what their true, helping them become their truest, deepest selves. That's what God wants. God wants us to be our truest, deepest self, and to enjoy and have fun being ourselves.
Well, it's like the Immaculate Heart Sisters.
Yes. One of my favorite groups.
I always say anyone worth reading has been in trouble with the Vatican. Tony, Anthony DeMello. I mean, there's another one. And when you shake things up and you bring out truth, there's always going to be some that are afraid. That doesn't mean stop. It means this is where true spiritual courage takes place.
Yeah.
And for all those that said stop, you have others that will say, let me follow. Because I think you're on to something. And I think that might be something that's important to me. I don't know what it is yet. You don't have to define it. But I sense in my heart of hearts, there's something important here.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the prophetic voice too. And sometimes spiritual directors, maybe have to use a prophetic voice. But there are people who speak with prophetic voices, like Thomas Merton, like Martin Luther King, like Richard Rohr, I think, and Dorothy Day. Those kind of people, they're speaking the truth to power and speaking the truth to our hearts. But sometimes spiritual directors often will have to do that at a point, saying, I've been listening to you, and God loves you, but I'm telling you that I really believe that this is God wants this of you right now, in a loving way, not saying you got to do this, but God might really be wanting and that's speaking a prophetic voice too.
Yes.
Challenging the person on the journey to say, maybe you really need to consider looking this way or walking away from that and going this way too. So that, and that's, it's not in a mean way, it's just in a loving way.
Well, all good prophets have been on the hit list, and it's true, because I think sometimes we give the idea in certain church settings that a prophet is someone who just says these magnificent things. People are moved deeply by it. Sometimes they say things that irritate us. And that's good, because the irritation gets us to move. Last week I was talking a little bit about the week before, about the grain of sand in the oyster. And it's an irritant. But it has a purpose. And if it completes the process, that irritation becomes a priceless pearl. But when it first starts out, it's just the irritation, as most prophets are.
Yeah, they can be irritating.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable.
Yeah. I'm going to pirate that. Was that plagiarism? Just creative research?
That's right. That's right. Oh, dear.
Oh, that's really neat. Now, let's say someone comes over to St. Paul's. And I highly recommend for anyone listening that you do. I stop in there from time to time because I love the message. I absolutely do. What are some of the things that are important to you that you teach on a spiritual level in these lights to the people who come to your parish?
Well, we always say welcome home. Whoever you are or wherever you are on your journey of faith, you are welcome here. And we always have this old saying, that you don't have to check your brains out when you come into the Episcopal Church. You come with your doubts, you come with your fears, you come with your belief, you come with your disbelief. But welcome home. This is your home. And come to the table. Come to the table, because there is a loving God who's here for you, wanting to feed you, wanting to hold you, wanting to walk with you. And again, it goes back to the simplicity of that.
Well, that comes back to the difference between a house and a home. A house is just a place you hang your hat. A home is where you go and you're loved and you love those around you. And it's a moving experience because you know you're safe.
Yes. And we need to feel safe more than ever.
Yes, we do.
Safety, we need that safety, and we try and offer that, and that means being inclusive and welcoming, everyone, especially those who are marginalized and those who have maybe been thrown away by religion, especially. We've had a lot of people who have been hurt by various denominations and their teachings, and, we want to make sure everybody feels safe.
Now, if somebody wants to check out St. Paul's, when do you have Mass?
We have Mass on Sundays, 10 a.m., and then a Spanish 12 noon Mass. And then we have a lot of services during the weekend. You just have to go to the website, which is stpaulspomona.org. That's the best way to find out what's going on, stpaulspomona.org. I don't know if I'm allowed to plug that.
Yes, please do.
stpaulspomona.org. Spell out the word saint.
We're going to try to pull it up to put it on our monitor in just a moment. Frank's working diligently in there. And so you don't care what denomination they come from,
No.
what their background's been.
No.
This is home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I wanted you to mention that, because I know when I was searching a little bit, where can an Orthodox boy, fit in a little bit and just be there and be comfortable. And you open the doors here for anyone looking on YouTube. Here,
Oh my gosh.
This is it right here. And
That's it. Thank you.
Our beloved Father Mark there. And I know this is going to sound a little bit hinky, but it is what it is. I think when you walk into a church, there are times you just know what you're walking into. And when I walked into St. Paul's, I felt very welcome.
Oh, thank you.
I felt a very loving presence. And you know me long enough to know that if I didn't feel that, I wouldn't say that. Because I think platitudes are just cheap and worthless. But there was a real community I found there. People coming from a lot of different areas.
Well, and people who have experienced a lot of wounds and become what Henry Nouwen called wounded healers.
Yes.
That we've all, myself, especially myself included, have been through a lot, and have felt wounded. But we allow those wounds to make us compassionate and to really try and make a home for everybody. And we're not perfect, but
Nobody is.
we do our best, yeah.
I tried to be perfect once. They told me, get off the cross. We need the wood.
Oh, that was you.
I decided to hang out for a while. And so, there'll be some letters coming on that one.
The life of Brian, right?
The life of Brian. There you go. So my guest this evening has been Father Mark Hallahan. And he's one of my dear friends and someone I look up to. As a spiritual brother, as a wonderful priest. And I want to encourage you that if you're in the Pomona area, certainly stop in. I think you'll really enjoy the Mass there.
You're more than welcome.
Do they have to be Episcopalian to receive communion?
No. The official, teaching is, all baptized Christians are welcome, but a lot of us have been pushing that envelope for quite a number of years. And so we always say, whoever you are or wherever you are on your journey, you're welcome to receive the bread and wine made holy at this table. We can't distribute the consecrated wine now because of COVID restrictions.
Right.
However, you can receive the bread of life.
I always bring Thunderbird with me anyhow. So I like communion with a kick. But that'll be the next letter that's in my inbox. Well, yeah, I think we're down to our last moment here. And Father Mark, thanks for coming and being such an important part of this show and for sharing your love and your information, your education on this. It's been really helpful. It's helpful to me. And for anyone who's listening, if no one told you that they love you this week, let me be the first. And thank you that you tune in each week. And, we can get through this together, because together we are a family. So we'll be back next week with Viewpoint with Father John. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.